Please click the thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and the bell notification. Thank you. Please click the thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and the bell notification. Thank you. Greetings. The United States government has significantly deregulated medical marijuana. The U.S. Justice Department has officially reclassified state-licensed medical marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, a move that formally acknowledges for the first time at the federal level that marijuana/cannabis has accepted medical value. Okay? Under Schedule 1 drugs such as heroin and LSD and others, the understanding that one of the premises that place them in Schedule 1 is that they have no medical value. And interestingly, Ganja was placed in Schedule 1 as having no medical value, which we know is not true. But and I should make another video to explain to you how Ganja got placed in Schedule 1, during the Nixon years, during President Nixon's presidency, which was just ridiculous. It was like a spurious type of thing where Ganja ended up being placed in Schedule 1, which it shouldn't be, right? Part of the ridiculousness of it is that, I'm going to read some more of this, but Schedule 1 is considered like the most dangerous drugs. And they have Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3. Cocaine is in Schedule 2. Ganja is in Schedule 1. So Ganja is considered way more dangerous than cocaine. Which anybody who really know this, that's not true, whatever. So in some ways, this is a long-standing, irrespective of what you feel or what you feel about Ganja, in some ways, this is a long-standing, a long-due correction, right? And there's a lot of stereotypes associated with Ganja as being like this evil drug and all this stuff. But since the dawn of, for a long time now, I think this commenced over in the Eastern country, India in particular, and over in China. Ganja has been used medicinally for thousands of years now, so, to help people with different ailments, pain, and all this stuff and whatever. This is nothing new. So to say that Ganja has no medical value and as such that it should be placed in Schedule 1 is not only inaccurate, but you can make a credible argument that it's certainly not serving the public's interest. The announcement of this decrease in regulation on marijuana follows an executive order from President Trump directing federal agencies to fast-track the rescheduling process and expand medical research. Yeah, the medical research is a big part of it. But part of what's going on here, you got certain people with money. It's the game. You use your money and you support your candidate and you tell your candidate what you want them to do for you in terms of policy and things like that. So you have people who, committed a significant amount of financial resources to support, certain political candidates because they're looking out for their interests, too, like a lot of lobbyists do here in America. And I think this is the Trump administration's response to some of those people who showed their support. However, to put this in perspective, until today, marijuana sat alongside heroin and LSD as a Schedule 1 substance, a category reserved for drugs the government considers the most dangerous and, by federal definition, having no legitimate medical use, like I said before. Schedule 3 is a significantly less restrictive classification. But again, this is not a legalization of marijuana, ganja, cannabis in any way, right? The change applies specifically to marijuana products approved by the FDA and those sold under state medical marijuana licenses. Medical marijuana, right? That is what it applies to. What we're talking about today and the reclassification today, again, keep it in mind, just medical marijuana. It does not legalize recreational marijuana, and it does not make medical cannabis fully legal under federal law, especially when it comes to crossing state lines. For scientists, the reclassification removes long-standing federal hurdles, making it easier to study marijuana safety and effectiveness for conditions like chronic pain, epilepsy, PTSD. And again, there's always been legitimate, pretty good too, legitimate scientific research on ganja. I'm Jamaican. I'm always saying ganja on marijuana's potential, and in many cases proven to help people with chronic pain, epilepsy. We call it fits in Jamaica, and PTSD. But because marijuana was under Schedule 1, in order to do research with it, there was just this highly restrictive and prohibitive process and protocols that researchers have to go through to work with Schedule 1 drugs. There's these stages that they have to go through with the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA. And it's just a whole bunch of hurdles. It's time consuming. And the DEA agents have to come to your place to examine it, and you have to keep it under certain, secure. You have to have a standard of, you have to have a security apparatus to keep the Schedule 1 drugs. And the idea is that we don't want people to, we want you to do the research with it, but we don't want you to think that you can be loose with it because it's a really dangerous drug if it's in Schedule 1. So this has been quite a hindrance to a great many researchers who want to do, legitimate work to help society and to help people with all kinds of sicknesses and hurt and pain and psychological ailments and so forth, where marijuana has the potential to help them in varying degrees. But because it was under Schedule 1, it was just a pain to work with. So by putting it in Schedule 3 now, the researchers now will have less hurdles, less barriers, less hindrances, in securing the marijuana in order to do their respective research. There are also two practical changes, associated with this decrease in the intensive, restrictive regulation for marijuana. One is that marijuana businesses will no longer be subjected to IRS, Section 280E, which, to not use the legalese, but just to say, the big thing with that is that businesses with marijuana were not allowed certain benefits and deductions, when they're doing tax returns. Now they will be able to make standard business deductions under Schedule 3. Additionally, because of the discrepancy between the states that legalize and authorize marijuana use in varying degrees, i.e. medical or recreational or both, and because you have states that have done so, but that it's still illegal on the federal level under the Schedule Schedule 1 designation. Financial institution banks do not work with these companies. So all these states that have legalized and authorized marijuana for varying use, and you have these ganja dispensaries, marijuana dispensaries making hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. Banks have nothing to do with it. And you know banks love to take people money because banks take your money and they use it to make money and whatever, and they capitalize their, what they do. But banks want nothing to do with, ganja money because they don't want an illegal exposure there. They don't want to be liable, because they consider, should they do so, it would be felonious. It would be a felony. So banks don't work with these dispensaries and these ganja companies, which has also been frustrating for the ganja companies. Because they can't invest, they can't move money and use money, through the financial systems, even to make transfers and so forth, and to use their profits to do certain things through the financial systems. They have not been able to do that. So it has been frustrating on their side and that they cannot function within the U.S. Fiscal system, I think. So the assumption now is that the banks are going to have a different approach there. And that would mean that at a minimum, the banks are going to say, okay, if you're a medical marijuana business or you're an FDA approved marijuana business, then we will work with you, because the government has not only signaled that that it would be okay to do so and things. So if something were to go to the courts or to go to the Supreme Court, all the way up to the Supreme Court will have it on record of, well, the government, did indeed move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So the banks, the financial institutions, should not be liable in any regard to say that they're conspiratorially working with illicit funds, from a criminal enterprise, i.e. the ganja dispensaries and companies, etc. So the banks should be more receptive to working with, funds garnered, obtained, profits from ganja businesses that so far are dealing with medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. And the Justice Department is calling today's action an initial step towards broader reclassification of marijuana, including recreational use. So this is an initial step, and the president's executive order did, order the federal agencies and authorities, and they have a complex way that they work together to get approval from each other to expedite the process, meaning make it move, fast track. That's the language that was used, fast track, to get this done. But there's some steps that they have to take. Now, if you're familiar with the way politics work, it doesn't mean that it's going to reach where the lobbyists for these entities would want it to reach. It doesn't mean that it's going to go there, So anything can happen at each step, A president can come in that is just really conservative and say, I'm not going to support this because of my religion or something like that or whatever. A president may want to do it, but the Congress may be made up of a collective that has the power and the numbers to say we oppose this firmly, and we don't want it to go any further. Anything can happen. It's politics, But the idea is that right now is that they're going for broader reclassification, and that is code for legalization, free up the weed, So we have to see how that goes on each step. But again, overall, today, April 23rd, 2026, in the United States, marijuana, medical marijuana, let me be specific because it's important. Medical marijuana has been moved from the classification of a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 3 drug, which means that it will now enjoy significantly less restrictions in its use. Medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. Recreational marijuana, though, is still legal in the states. So the federal authorities in general will continue to assume a posture of, like a blind eye, like, okay, we know you're doing it over there, we're not going to enforce it, but we know certain states are doing it. But in truth, the federal government, should they choose to do so, they can, reinforce federal law and battle with the states. But the likelihood of that happening is kind of minimum, because you have states like Florida, super conservative, that have have been a little bit more liberal with marijuana, medical marijuana, and so forth. So the likelihood of the federal government doing something like that is pretty slim. But people are playing it. In all these big financial institutions, you have lawyers who are compliance lawyers, and they wade into, they're mired into the complexities of complying with the law and making sure you stay above board and things like that. But again, interesting things are happening here. They said they were going to do it in December, and now they're making a move to do so. And apparently, the effort to continue it is going to start in June to get to the next step and so forth. Okay? All right. That's it. For Ganja, I step up in the United States, man.